I've been to a lot of parties in my life, but there's one I'll never forget. Not because it was fun, not because it was wild, but because it was the first time I saw what happens when a stupid joke goes way too far. It was late August, one of those brutally hot nights where even the wind felt like a hairdryer. A guy I knew, Drew, was throwing a party at his parents' place while they were out of town. They had one of those massive backyard pools, the kind that was too deep in some areas for casual swimming. It was one of those parties where everyone was either drinking, playing games, or pretending to know how to swim just to impress someone. The house itself was packed, but the backyard was where the real party was happening. There were at least 50 people out there, loud music blasting from speakers by the pool, and an obnoxiously bright spotlight shining over everything. The pool was full of people, some floating on inflatables, others standing around the edges talking. It was the kind of party where nobody was really keeping track of anything. Who was coming in? Who was leaving? What was actually happening? And that's probably why nobody paid much attention when the joke started. It started with a few guys messing around, pushing each other into the pool. Normal stuff. Someone would turn around, get shoved in, come up laughing, and the cycle would repeat. It was harmless until it wasn't. I was sitting near the edge of the pool, watching everything, when I saw them target this one guy, Marcus. He wasn't the type who usually came to parties. Quiet, kind of awkward, didn't really drink. I think he only showed up because his friends dragged him along. He was standing off to the side, sipping a soda, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. That should have been enough to leave him alone. But someone got the idea that it would be hilarious to throw him in. At first, it seemed like a joke. A couple of guys walked up, messing with him, pretending they were just pushing him playfully. He laughed it off, shook his head, tried to step away, but they kept going. More people started noticing, laughing, egging them on. The kind of group mentality where nobody really thinks about whether it's a good idea. They just go along with it. Then, before he could stop them, they grabbed him. It happened fast. One guy grabbed his arms. Another grabbed his legs, and before he could yell, they carried him toward the deep end of the pool. He was panicking, not laughing, not playing along, panicking. I don't think anyone really processed that part until it was too late. They threw him in like he was nothing. A quick lift, a hard splash, and then he was gone under the water. At first, people laughed. They clapped, cheered, and went back to their conversations. But the laughter stopped fast, because he didn't come back up. It was like time slowed down. 10 seconds, 15. The surface rippled, but he wasn't breaking through. At first, it seemed like maybe he was messing with them, pretending to stay under as a joke, but then someone muttered that he couldn't swim. That changed everything. People started calling his name. A couple of guys who had been in on the joke stood frozen, realizing they had just tossed someone into the deep end, who had no idea how to stay afloat. Then the panic really started. Someone finally reacted and jumped in, but the water was dark, the pool lights barely cutting through it. More people were getting in now, diving, searching, shouting his name. I could feel the tension shift from fun to horror in seconds. The guys who threw him in were backing away like they wanted to disappear, like they weren't the reason this was happening. The music was still playing, but nobody was listening anymore. Then finally, someone found him. I'll never forget the way they dragged him up. 2 guys pulled him to the surface, and for a second, I thought it was too late. His body was limp, his face pale under the dim lights. They got him to the poolside, and people scrambled back, making space. Someone was shouting to call 911, but I don't even know if anyone actually did. I stood there, frozen, as someone started trying to get him to breathe again. The party was dead silent now. The people who had been shoving each other into the pool earlier weren't laughing anymore. The ones who had been screaming for more drinks weren't saying a word. Then, finally, after what felt like forever, he coughed. It was violent, ugly, like his body was rejecting the water that had nearly killed him. Someone helped roll him onto his side, and he just lay there, gasping, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. And then, just as quickly as it started, it was over. Nobody knew what to do. Some people awkwardly patted him on the back, telling him he was okay. Others just stood there, staring at the water, probably realizing how different the night could have ended. The guys who threw him in didn't say a word. They just disappeared into the house, probably hoping nobody would blame them. And Marcus? He just sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, still trying to catch his breath. Eventually, someone helped him inside, got him a towel, sat him down. The party was still technically going, but it was clear that nothing was the same. People started leaving, one by one, until the backyard was nearly empty. I left not long after. I don't know if Marcus ever talked to those guys again. I don't know if he told anyone what happened, or if he just tried to forget it. But I do know that I never saw him at another party after that. It took me a long time to talk about what happened that night. Even now, when I think about it, I still feel the same sinking feeling in my stomach, the same tightness in my chest. It was supposed to be just another summer party. A girl from my college, someone I barely knew, was throwing it at her boyfriend's house. The kind of place that was way too nice for a college student to own. Turns out, his family had money. A huge backyard, a pool so big it could be at a resort. Even a guest house off to the side. I didn't even want to go at first, but my best friend convinced me. She had a thing for one of the guys who was going to be there and didn't want to go alone. I figured it would be harmless. Just a few hours of music, drinks, and pretending to have fun. I had no idea how close I'd come to something I wasn't sure I'd be able to walk away from. From the second we got there, something about the vibe was off. Not in an obvious way. Nothing that would make me turn around and leave. But there were little things. The guys were louder than usual, more aggressive in the way they joked around, in the way they looked at people. A few of them were already drunk, even though the party had barely started. There were girls there too, but not a lot, and the ones who were there seemed different. A little too out of it. I told myself they were just having fun, that maybe they pre-gamed before coming. But looking back, I should have trusted my gut. The pool was the main attraction. People were either in it, around it, or watching from the deck. I wasn't planning on getting in. I had my swimsuit under my dress, but I wasn't comfortable enough to just strip down and jump in like everyone else. Instead, I stuck to the sidelines, sipping my drink, watching my friend flirt with the guy she had a crush on. That's when I first noticed him. I don't know if I had seen him before. Maybe on campus, maybe at another party. He was one of those guys who seemed to know everyone, moving through the crowd like he owned the place. Too confident, too familiar, even with people he had just met. At first, I didn't think much of it when he started talking to me. I was polite but distant, hoping he'd lose interest and move on. He didn't. Every time I tried to step away, he found a reason to pull me back into conversation. It wasn't obvious enough to make a scene, but it was enough to make me uncomfortable. Then, at some point, he handed me a drink. I didn't see where it came from. That was my first mistake. I wasn't drinking much that night. I knew my limits, and I knew I still had to drive home. But after a while, I started feeling wrong. Not drunk, not tipsy. My body felt heavy, my thoughts slower. The music seemed distant, like I was hearing it from underwater. My skin felt too warm, my legs unsteady. I knew I hadn't had enough alcohol to feel that way. That's when I realized he was still next to me, watching. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe I was just tired, maybe the heat was getting to me. I tried to act normal, to shake off the feeling, but it was getting harder to focus. Then suddenly, he was leading me away from the crowd. I don't remember exactly how I got there. One minute I was near the pool. The next I was stumbling toward the guest house, his hand on my arm. The house itself was dark. The main party was outside, so nobody was really paying attention to who was coming in and out. I tried to stop, tried to say something, but my body wasn't responding the way I wanted it to. I was barely standing when we got inside. I remember him shutting the door. I remember him leading me toward the couch, his hands on my shoulders, guiding me down. That's when the fear hit. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't just tired. I tried to push him away, but my arms felt weak. My legs wouldn't cooperate. The room was spinning. He was saying something, but the words weren't registering. Then his hands were on my legs. I don't know what would have happened if the door hadn't opened. One of his friends walked in, laughing, drunk, completely oblivious. He made some comment, something casual, something that wasn't meant to save me. But it did, because for 1 second, the guy in front of me hesitated. And that second was all I needed. With everything I had left in me, I forced myself up and pushed past them. I don't even remember running. I just remember bursting through the door, stumbling back toward the party, desperate to get away. I found my friend near the pool, grabbed her arm, and told her we had to leave. She didn't ask questions. She saw the look on my face and just followed. We were out of there in minutes. I spent the rest of the night trying to shake the feeling of his hands on me, the feeling of being trapped in my own body, unable to move, unable to fight. I don't know what was in that drink. I don't know how close I came to something I wouldn't be able to walk away from. But I do know this. I don't take drinks from strangers anymore. I don't let myself get separated from my friends at parties. And I never ignore my gut feeling when something doesn't feel right. I never expected to be in the middle of a fight that night. I wasn't even planning to go to the party in the first place. I wasn't the type to enjoy big crowds, loud music, or reckless drinking. But my friend convinced me, said it would be fun, that I needed to loosen up for once. It was at some guy's house, someone I didn't know personally, but I had seen him around campus. His parents were loaded, so the place was massive. Huge backyard, a giant pool, and a deck that was filled with more people than it probably should have been. At first, it was fun. I stuck close to my friend, sipping on a drink I had poured myself. The music was blasting. People were jumping into the pool, and for a while, it just felt like another typical college party. Then things started to shift. It wasn't obvious at first. Just a few guys talking a little too closely, their voices a little too sharp over the music. I didn't pay much attention. Guys got into arguments all the time at parties. It was usually over stupid things, a girl or a spilled drink. Most of the time, it didn't escalate beyond some shouting and posturing. But something about this felt different. One of the guys, someone I had seen around before but didn't know well, kept looking over at another group near the pool. His expression was tense, his jaw tight. His friends were trying to distract him, patting his back, telling him to let it go. And then, all at once, it exploded. I wasn't close enough to hear exactly what set it off. But 1 second, people were just talking. And the next, a drink went flying. Then a shove. Then a punch that connected hard enough to make everyone stop and turn. For a second, there was silence. Then chaos. The guy who got hit didn't hesitate. He swung back, and just like that, more people jumped in. It was like a chain reaction. One guy defending another, pushing, shoving, fists flying. It all happened so fast. I was standing near the pool when someone got shoved backward. He stumbled, arms flailing, and before he could catch himself, he went straight into the water. The splash was massive, soaking the people standing at the edge. But no one was laughing, because the fight wasn't stopping. I moved back, trying to stay out of it, but the fight was spreading. People were either jumping in to help or trying to break it up, but no one was really in control anymore. The sound of fists hitting skin, bodies crashing into tables, the sharp crack of a bottle breaking, it all blended together. The music was still playing, but it felt out of place now, like background noise to something way darker. Someone stumbled into me, nearly knocking me off balance. I barely caught myself before I ended up in the pool, my heart pounding as I tried to figure out the fastest way to get out of there. But the crowd was packed tight. Then suddenly, one of the guys involved in the fight, someone much bigger than me, was thrown backward. He crashed into the deck railing, and for a split second, it looked like it might give way. People screamed, jumping out of the way. And that was when I finally broke free from the crowd. I grabbed my friend's arm and pulled her toward the house, my hands shaking. She was still trying to process what was happening. her eyes wide as she looked back at the chaos unfolding behind us. The fight only stopped when someone got hurt bad. One of the guys in the middle of it all suddenly staggered back, holding his face, blood dripping between his fingers. I didn't see what happened, but the second people noticed, the energy shifted. No one wanted to be responsible for something serious. The guys who had been fighting a second ago suddenly backed off, their breathing heavy, their faces still twisted with anger. But it was over. People started grabbing their things, making excuses to leave. The party wasn't fun anymore. I left before the cops showed up, but I heard about it later. Someone called them when things got out of control. And by the time they arrived, most people had already scattered. No one got arrested, but the guy who got hurt had to get stitches. The days after, people talked about it like it was some crazy story, laughing about how wild it had been. But I couldn't find it funny, because I kept thinking about how bad it could have gotten. How one wrong move could have turned it from a stupid fight into something a lot worse.